To be clear, disparity between blacks and whites in the United States on such issues as income, social justice and place in society existed long before Barack Obama ever took office. But what is also true is the hope and expectation by many who propelled him to office that his election might mark a turning point in race relations. Candidate Obama himself tried to temper those expectations when, in a 2008 speech, he said, "I've never been naive enough to believe we can get beyond racial divisions in a single election cycle or candidacy." He has governed with the self-proclaimed belief that rising tides lift all boats, but as the United States continues to recover from the Great Recession, African Americans disproportionately continue to struggle. And then there's this. According to the website Mapping Police Violence, more than 100 unarmed black people were killed by police in 2015. That's 5 times the rate of unarmed whites. Such incidents, along with the killing of 9 people last June by a white shooter at a historic black church in South Carolina, compelled the US president to speak out.
For too long, we've been blind to the way past injustices continue to shape the present. Perhaps we see that now. Perhaps this tragedy causes us to ask some tough questions about how we can permit so many of our children to languish in poverty, or attend dilapidated schools, or grow up without prospects for a job or for a career. Perhaps it causes us to examine what we're doing to cause some of our children to hate. Perhaps it softens hearts towards those lost young men, tens and tens of thousands caught up in the criminal justice system, and lead us to make sure that that system's not infected with bias.
Powerful words from US President Barack Obama. And joining us here in Washington to talk about all this is attorney Barbara Arnwine. She's the president and founder of the Transformative Justice Coalition. Joe Madison is a longtime civil rights activist and radio talk show host with Sirius-XM's Urban View channel. And with us is economist, commentator and author Julianne Malveaux. Her upcoming book is entitled Are We Better Off? It focuses on race, President Obama and public policy. Thanks, 3 of you, for joining us. Julianne, let's start with you. You've got the book coming out. We saw the clip there, and we also heard earlier about President Obama saying he's not naive. Transformative race relations can't happen in one term or one president. Given that, though, is there any disappointment because he has been the first African-American president?
You know, there's been profound disappointment. On one hand, there's been enormous pride. Every time we see the president walk onto Air Force One, hear him do a proclamation, our hearts open up. And the older we are, like my mom, you know, great aunts, they really are enormously proud. At the same time, I'm an analyst and I'm a realist. And when we look at the numbers, there's more black poverty now than there was when the president took office. And so not only that, but he has declined opportunities to make a symbolic difference. He's made many symbolic differences, but he also has declined to make some symbolic differences. And so you have, depending on who you're speaking with in the African-American community, you will get a sense of disappointment. I opened the book up talking about the blind man and the elephant, or the blind person and the elephant, as I say. Parable, yeah. Where, you know, they go up, and it's a trunk, it's a tree. Depending on who you are, that's how you experience this president. And many people have experienced them, especially if you're African-American in the top 1%. The number of African-Americans earning more than $200,000 a year went up under this president. Slightly, but it went up. At the same time, the number in poverty went up as well.
Barbara, do you think he was damned if he did and damned if he didn't? Because, you know, he's the first black president and could have been criticised for going over the top for helping the black community. Isn't it better to raise all boats, of which people of colour, perhaps in poverty or...
It never has worked.
Tell me why.
The trickle-down politics, the trickle-down economic, all of those theories have never worked for the black community. You need targeted, very specific, racially conscious, and really well-designed programming to make a difference for African Americans. That's what's been missing, very sadly, in this administration. And he's had poor advisors.
You know, I want to just piggyback off of a couple of things, and I'll take the elephant analogy first.
Which is also a symbol for Republicans, so we'll get on to that.
We're sorry about that.
But you know, there's also another adage, and that is, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Very good point.
The other thing is, this thing about all boats rise. Look, here's the answer to that. Some of us have dinghies. And, you know, a dinghy will rise and a yacht will rise. What African Americans are tired of is being in dinghies. What good is it if we rise at the same time, but we still are in a dinghy? So the reality is that the president has not done what he should be doing before there's a tragedy. As I watched this, I thought to myself, he said the right things, but look what it took. 9 lives being shot.
And almost 7 years.
And 7 years.
And you know, the gap, I mean, the racial economic gaps have not closed under this president, unfortunately. And again, there have been opportunities. When we passed the Recovery Act, for example, money went to the states. What if it had gone to cities, which are blacker, browner, older, younger, and more female? You have hit more disadvantaged people that way. You could have, when he did these promise zones, you could have had more urban areas included in these promise zones. So basically, you've had a president, we know that he's the president of all of America, but you know, to adages that we talked about off air, you won't get fed in your mama's house if you don't bring the plate to the table. And African Americans have not pushed this man hard enough to do what he needs to do.
And I also think, quite honestly, let's also be honest, you had on the very first day, you had a United States Congress that said, even if it hurts our constituents, we're not going to help this president.
I want to get to that. Was there actually a racial backlash, do you think?
Was there?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's take it in turns.
We're unanimous on that one.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
so we all agree on that. But Joe, how did that manifest itself?
It manifests itself in a do-nothing Congress. That's how it manifests itself. Simple as that.
And
Even more than that, you know, we had a minister out of Arizona who preached that he prayed for this president's death.
That's right.
And now, had someone preached that they prayed for a white president's death, were they an African American? The FBI would have moved in with them. Mitch McConnell said his goal for this man
was
to
the
be a one-term president.
But has
Barbara.
people forgotten that there were marches in the streets of Washington, D.C. with thousands of people holding Sambo signs, with the president, you know, being made to look like a Sambo, and Hitler, and all of this, you know, all of these hate that was directed towards him in his first year of the presidency. You see, what I think is that they came into this presidency with an ostrich mentality, that somehow they're going to put their heads in the ground and pretend that people don't see race. But people always see race.
But now
and he never was going to be able to
But now
be...
the ostrich has lifted its head, and the ostrich is Donald Trump. And I mean
No, that's
this,
not an ostrich, that's a dodo bird.
Big dodo.
and what I mean by
I could
that.
just leave now. You guys can run.
Well, what I mean by that is we're going to take America back. Back to where? Back from who?
They
I'm
always
an
were saying
American.
It's racially
They were
loaded
saying
language.
that.
Is that what you're
Absolutely.
saying?
If you
to
want to
start
go,
with?
if you want to go back to the good
beginning.
old days, it's like good for who?
Right.
In
Right.
1940, in
Are you
1940,
serious?
70% of all black women were maids. I don't want to go back to the
Right.
1940s. I don't know how to sweep. I mean,
I don't
we
even
talk
wanna go
We
about
have vacuums now.
whatever.
It sounds like you do the cleaning in your house, which is very good.
You know, but basically, we've got all kinds of racially coded language,
Right.
but not only
Yes.
coded language, but with this president, they don't have to code. When a congressman from South Carolina yells from the floor of Congress, you lie.
Right.
You've never seen that before.
And none of you for a second think this is just the general deterioration of American politics. You
No,
think it's accelerated because of President
Look,
Obama being
look,
black. I just wanted to get that on the record.
Well,
Yes,
and here's what you get on the record. You go back to, someone once said that we go back to Jim Crow. We all know the history of Jim Crow.
But for our international audience, just describe that, because that's a phrase
I mean,
that...
Jim Crow was just outright segregation by law. I mean, segregation's a legal term. What you now have is the same, and you're the lawyer. Now what we have, though, is James Crow Esquire. It's just a sophisticated form of what Jim Crow was 50 years ago. And since you have an international audience, let's make something very clear, and our good friend Dr. Frances Welsing would remind us if she was here, that this is a global issue. This is not just the United States of America. This is global.
And we're seeing it in Europe. You know, we're seeing the backlash not only to Muslims, but it's also been to African immigrants in England, in France, in Germany. And so we know that basically the roots of European capitalism were about the exploitation of black people.
Founded in slavery.
Yes.
But even with all of this backlash, he could have done more.
Yes.
That's where we...
Because this is where I was going, Barbara. I'm really glad you brought this up,
Yes.
because you had this tremendous entrenched opposition to
Yes.
him. Politically or racially, everyone agrees with that. It's been a very
Yes.
nasty 8 years. But then he's done other things. You know, the first
Yes.
black Attorney General of the United States, and not just any black attorney.
When 7...
Huh?
yes, well, yes.
Eric
keep on
Holder.
going.
I
Yes.
mean, Eric Holder
Yes.
was, you know, a civil rights leader.
And his alter ego, right? Because Eric could talk about race, and Eric did talk about race. And of course, Eric was hated very viciously by Congress, called up and really persecuted by Congress. Nevertheless, the president should have in his first year done two things that he did not do: prioritize judges and prioritize jobs.
He might have to do that in his last year as well.
And you know what ended up, he had a 2-year window that he squandered. And
You
that's
mean
one
when
of the points.
Yes.
the Democrats
He had the
were in
Democratic
charge
Congress, he had the
in
Democratic
Congress as
Senate,
well, yeah.
and he sit there playing kumbaya. I want to get along with Republicans. They were not trying to get along with him. We might have seen a very different kind of administration.
So he was trying to be Lincoln when everyone else was trying to be Nixon. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. And
But
you
it's
know,
a
the jobs
misread.
thing, and the jobs thing is important because by 2010, people,
Yes.
economic situation had not changed for
That's
people,
right.
and so they voted in reaction. I know that health was important. It was extremely important. He mishandled health. Then by the time that Senator Kennedy had passed, you had to wait on the Scott Brown vote. But what you see there is that had he gone with jobs, it would have been easy then to get health.
Right.
But the flip side is you got health, and it's a singular accomplishment. Nobody can take that away from him, even as they chip away at Obamacare, Affordable Care Act. You can't take that away from him. But you still have people, and in the African-American community, you are still seeing a powerfully painful joblessness.
I want
still.
to pick up on that because the figures are quite stark. In fact, if you compare the figures of the Obama administration with previous administrations, they still don't look good when you're talking about the number of African Americans as a proportion of the community still mired in poverty. Is that, Joe, I just want everyone to pick up on here. Joe first. Is that because of the economic cycle we've been through? Because it has been particularly brutal to the middle class and people below it as well.
I don't know. The Economist might be better answering that than,
Well, how do you feel?
than I am. I think what it is, it's race, and here's a formula. R equals P plus P. Race equals prejudice plus power. Mm-hmm. Presidents play to power. When Wall Street is in power, when we end up giving Wall Street bankers all the money they need to bail out, and then they turn around and do the same thing, and you don't put any strings attached to it, then you become president of the United States, as he did, and he's basically told, you can't undo this.
But you know, the other piece of it is that when you have cyclical changes in the economy, and we've seen that, we've seen the economy go down, now it's trying to come back up, there are ways legally, there are ways through law, through public policy that you can protect people.
And you made this point in your book, actually,
Yes.
that there was not enough targeting of this, right?
That's right.
Not enough targeting, not enough protection, not enough, there are just so many things that could have been done that weren't done. And they did not have to be directed at black people.
And
they could have been directed at urban people. They could have been directed at poor people. I mean, this president...
What you're saying is he didn't have to use the word black,
no,
right,
because
Barbara?
he acted like his mouth would freeze if he said black.
He should have done some things that were black.
You know,
I mean,
but
how do you go through the first cabinet and no black woman?
Yes.
I mean, come on. I mean, there are these issues that he should have thought about black. He also could have done, as you said, more general things. I think, he knew that he was coming into this housing crisis and that African Americans had been sold all these predatory...
Their wealth is primarily in their home.
Right, and he knew that. And he knew that the predatory lending problem was a huge one. That should have been told to the housing and urban development that that's your #1 priority, is to make sure that those homes aren't lost, that you protect people from foreclosure.
Instead, you lost,
sorry, guys,
instead you lost about almost a third of all African-American wealth. All of it.